Listen, whoever's here, when you were alive, did you ever talk to anybody?
Welcome, everyone. It must be every other Thursday, and if it is, time for just another paranormal podcast. So I am your host, Ken DaCosta. I am joined tonight by our good friend, Michelle Roos, coming to us from the great state of Iowa. And Michelle, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Oh, I'm excited. I can't wait till we start digging into all this. This is going to be great.
Yeah, we're thinking of what we wanted to get into. And real quickly, a few years back, I had done a presentation on paranormal investigating, but it wasn't the typical paranormal 101 things. I mean, we all know that don't go alone, get permission before you go. I mean, those are things that are hammered into us. But there are a lot of nuances of investigation. A lot of them come from more of even the psychological realm. Not that I am not a psychologist, nor am I a scientist. But when you spend enough time doing this, like any job or any activity or hobby that you do, the more you do it, the more hours you put into it, you get a feel for things. Would you agree with that, Michelle?
I absolutely agree with that. I've always said in this field, we don't have professionals. We actually are continuing to learn. And that is a huge deal because not everything is the same. So, we've had to learn how to kind of pivot as we're going along. Where do you draw that line? What do you say? How do you have people coming in, talking to them? And I have noticed that I have certain things I do the same, but also I know how to kind of pivot when I need to.
Right. So I think we'll get right into this. There are 13 tipping points. No reason that the number 13 came up, but there were just a matter of some nuances to investigation. And I think that the underlying thing before we even get started is you have to understand that in doing this, you're dealing with people. You're dealing with people both in the physical realm and the ethereal realm, who for the most part were once living, breathing human beings. So you have to understand something about human nature. You have to be a people person. You have to be a good listener. And you have to have that kind of BS meter in you too. That if a story doesn't make sense, you try to, as gracefully as possible, maybe steer them in a different direction or very graciously sort of recuse yourself from the situation. Okay.
Doing the Michael Jackson moonwalk out the door.
Yeah, but, very professionally.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get down to the first thing that we want to discuss tonight. And I want to tell everybody ahead of time in chat, because I am kind of going back and forth. Yeah, LLS, BS meter. Yeah, it happens. If I don't get your comments up there, and please feel free to ask questions, I'm going to be kind of going back and forth between the presentation and your comments in the studio. But let's get on to the first one. Number one, the paranormal is a controversial subject and will generate polarized responses. And what I mean by that is that you have believers and you have skeptics, and both can go to extremes to prove their point. None are infallible, but you have to accept that there's merit in both. You have to listen to the skeptical point of view, as well as if you've had experiences and you're a believer, that's all well and good. But when you get into this field, you have to understand that while a lot of people think it's very cool, there are an equal number of people out in the world that think we're all crazy and why are we wasting our time on this? So you have to accept that going in and just kind of let it roll off your shoulders.
And it's the same concept like you hear two sides of the story, and then you have the truth. And having the skeptic and the full believer in between is where your answers are that you're trying to actually find out. So it is super important to have both sides.
Right. One of the things that I've learned is that in doing an interview with a person after they tell me their story, I don't ask them any questions because I don't want to lead them in a direction. And this is how I gauge whether there's legitimacy. Because if they tell me their story and then I say, have you ever seen an apparition? And they go, yes, after the fact, I would think that I would lead with that.
Yeah.
So you let them tell their story. But the other thing, Michelle, is I ask them if everybody in this location, if we decide to pay a visit to them, is on board with us being there. Because there's nothing more awkward than walking in a place and somebody, it's usually the husband, doesn't want you there, doesn't believe in what you do, and you're only there for a certain number of people. It can be a very awkward situation.
You have to have everybody vested in it, because if you don't, there's a lot of part of the story you miss, because even if it is the husband, they have been to some of those and they don't tell you ahead of time. You walk in and they normally sit there and go, yeah, I'm letting you come just to make sure they feel at ease, but I don't believe in this, and nobody else, just kind of feeding into them. So it does make the whole investigation a lot harder to do, because you're kind of worried that if things are, not the way he wants to hear it or she wants to hear it, then it can actually cause a lot of trauma in the family itself afterwards.
Mhm.
Like you have said at the beginning, this is about people, from the living to the ones who lived before. And you're not just dealing with the supernatural, you're also dealing with whatever trauma is happening in the family. So, and a lot of investigators forget that little piece.
Yeah, I mean, we're not there to cause fights after we leave. One of the last things I'll say about this is you have to be willing to tell people the truth, right? Not
Oh, yeah.
necessarily what they want to hear. Because a lot of people want the haunting. I don't know, maybe it makes them feel a little unique. Maybe they're fans of the shows, whatever.
Yeah.
We'll get into self-diagnosis a little bit later. I know that there's a lot of meat
Mm,
to chew on there. But you can't do it to pander or just to placate people. Because I've
no.
had situations where I've walked away and it's like, we weren't able to document anything. I'm not saying you're not having experiences, but on this particular night, it was quiet. Maybe we'll come back. If you don't tell them what they want to hear, they'll soon move on to another paranormal group who will tell them what they want to hear. But at least you can walk away knowing that you were as honest with them as possible in the amount of time you were there.
And that's huge. And, that's one thing that people fall into, they're afraid that if they don't say something that they want to hear, that, people are going to just be like, oh my God, you're the worst people out there. We
Right.
always try to debunk everything. Again, we're talking about people who are living in a home. We don't want people to be scared where they're living. That's their home. And again, like I always say, you can't pay the spirits to start showing things. So we might not get something the first time or the second time, but we never put it out there like, what they're feeling or seeing isn't true, but it's just something we couldn't find at that moment.
Right. Exactly. I've often said, I can't be expected to experience in 5 or 6 hours every
Yeah.
phenomena you have in the 25 years you've lived there. That's a
Yeah.
that's a big ask, just because we ask nicely. But you have to be honest with people, and sometimes it will. I'm not going to say blow up in your face, because if you're being honest, you know, you can walk away from it. But we've had those people who have said in the past, they don't know what they're doing. They said
Yes.
there's nothing here.
Yep.
I'll t- I'll tell you a horrible story, but I got to tell you off the air. Sorry,
Okay.
guys. Um, let's go on to the second rule. Document everything as soon as possible, no matter how trivial it might seem at the time. And this is very important because, if you're in a session and you take a break, you know, people say, what kind of equipment should you bring? Pen and paper is a good thing. A
Yep.
camera is a good thing, even if you record yourself on camera. And in between sessions, whatever you might have experienced, whether it's a personal experience or something overt, now is the time to, in your own words or in your own voice, do it while it's fresh in your mind. Don't rely on your memory, because there are too many outside stimuli, too many distractions out there. And then your memory will begin to kind of make things up or add things on or leave things out.
Absolutely. Just like when we're doing private investigations, there we actually have forms for the investigators of, what time was it? Was there storms? How were you feeling? Were things going on? Because we have to have all that documentation too, because we might not catch something on, tapes or video, but we can say, okay, this family said they were actually feeling this and heard this. And so did you, to kind of, I mean, that's again, we're going in, I think it was Shelley who said it best about being detectives. And so you have to make sure, like you said, doesn't matter how trivial it is, document, 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 or it didn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, do it as soon as possible, and then you can revert back to that if you're the type of person or a team that writes a case file and maybe submits it to the client. Have all of this down at the time. If you find out that it wasn't what you thought it was after review, then fine. You can strike that. Oh, that was somebody in another room who made the noise. That's fine. Find that out later, but get your thoughts down as quickly as possible. Now we're going to get into a little bit more of the human elements here with 3. Respect all requests for anonymity. And I have what I like to call my paranormal jackass theory. You get a normal person who requests anonymity, you
Yeah.
bring in an audience for it, henceforth you are a total jackass. And
Absolutely. Preach it.
I will just say this and get out of the way. Many times, or all the time, if we're at a private residence, we do not wear our Rise Up Paranormal gear. We don't need the black t-shirts with our logo on it, because we all know each other already. We don't have to identify ourselves in a house. If the neighbors are watching, they just see a bunch of people maybe walking in regular clothing. When it gets a little darker, maybe we'll go out and bring our equipment in and our cases. But we try to treat ourselves as though we're coming over to play cards that night. Because if there's a family involved, we don't want the kids being teased at school. We don't want them not to have sleepovers because people are afraid because the house has a bad reputation. We don't want to put it on social media so people can look it up and find out where you work. And so please remember, when people are telling us things, they are sharing things with us that sometimes they won't even tell family or their closest friends. But us as total strangers, they put that faith in us to tell us the most unimaginable story, the wildest stories. So you got to take that trust seriously. You know, if they ask for
Absolutely.
anonymity, don't go put it on freaking YouTube. And I mean, don't do that.
No, and you got to also remember too, they're also taking a chance of having a group of strangers in their home, not
Mm-hmm.
knowing exactly what they're inviting. And if you're walking in there like you're about to do the next ghost show, I mean, right there, you know, me as a person, if I was calling, I'd be like, I'm closing the door going, you got the wrong house.
Yeah. Well, what it is these days, not to sound like that old guy, but you always could get information, but the delivery system is different in this day and age. You can reach
Yeah.
100,000 people by pressing enter. And you have to, I know you want the world to know that you do this and you're available to be called on. And I understand this. And I say this as someone who on this channel does live investigations at places. So I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here, but there is a whole process that we go through if we're going to bring a live investigation to anybody. And typically it's in a public place that invites guests in to investigate. I would never, under any circumstances, ever do that in someone's home.
Correct. There's two sides, you know, you have the side where it is for the public to watch and help. But when you're dealing with families, it has to be just you and the family, and that's it.
Right, right. So don't be a jackass out there. That's the
No,
bottom line, okay? Um,
that's a
if
new
it,
t-shirt.
well, if it becomes more about you than it does about them, you
Yeah.
need to check yourself and reconsider what it is that you're doing. Because if you think this is a cool case that we can put pictures and video and things out there, and I know you get permission from the owner first, and if you do and they're on board with it, that's fine. But I've heard just as many stories of people who have found their home on YouTube that had no idea it was getting filmed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So resist that self promotion a little bit. Pump the brakes on that. Let your work speak for you. Because if you do a good job and you treat people right, word will get around. And word of mouth is much better than throwing business cards out the window.
Absolutely.
Let's go on to 4. This is a little bit more highbrow. Don't disregard possible coincidences. Synchronistic elements may be at work, and we have a little definition of synchronistic. Simultaneous occurrences of casually unrelated events and the belief that the simultaneity has meaning beyond mere coincidence. I wrote this.
I'm glad you read that.
I wrote this and I can't pronounce it, but I don't know. I'm curious to hear what you think, Michelle. I believe that not everything is synchronatic, and the universe has a plan for us, and everything's tied in. I happen to believe that coincidences can happen. A lot of people think, well, there's no such thing as coincidences, but I'm eager to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I am kind of that person that's kind of in between, because there are some things that I look at and I'm like, you know, the universe actually has brought this, you know, of those meetings of people, you know, of how did this happen and that kind of stuff. I can honestly say I really don't believe in coincidence, because I think there is a path that we all take, whether we go one way and somehow we end up back right where we're supposed to be. So I'm on the opposite side of you right there, because I believe there is a reason why we go certain paths. We might have one way, And, just like Google, sometimes it takes you on those back roads, but we end up coming right back out where we're supposed to be and meet the people we're supposed to meet, or have something happen that was supposed to happen maybe 5 miles down the road.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I look at it almost like, I call it like the phone call dilemma, where I'm thinking of Michelle Roos. My phone rings and it's you. And I say, oh my God, I was just thinking about you. Well, isn't that funny? So we have our conversation, whatever we got to do, we hang up, we move on. Maybe 6 months or 8 months later, I'm thinking about my cousin. The phone rings, it's my cousin. Man, I was just thinking about you. I mean, that happens to everyone. I was just
yes, it
thinking
does.
about you. This is really weird. And so now some people can just let that go as coincidence. Other people don't let it go. And the next thing they're telling you is that, oh, that always happens to me. Maybe twice a year, 3 times a year. But they will tell you, oh, it always happens to me. I'll be thinking about somebody. I don't know if there's a number. Did you do it 3 times? Did you do it 30 times? If you've done it 30 times, then I'm interested. But some people can't just leave that as what it is. They hold
Correct.
on to that.
Yeah. And, I don't hold on to it, but, it does make you go, hmm. But again, I do know, just like the phone call, oh, Ken was thinking about me. That could be BS. He probably just said that because I'm on the phone. So
Right.
I kind of think of, that kind of situation. But there's other situations I really do believe that we are guided for a reason to be there, or, have that meeting or anything like that.
Right.
So, but I don't like dwell on it or kind of dig deep and wonder, what sign are you trying to show me? And I don't go
Right.
that far,
Right.
but there's times where you're like, this is crazy.
Sure.
Or it was a meant to be. So,
I think that's human nature. I want to tell everybody a couple of stories here when we're talking about coincidence, right? Because people love to throw karma at you. So I'm going to tell you a
oh,
couple of
yeah.
stories. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories with two of the weirdest coincidences. Well, I don't know. You tell me if they're coincidences, okay? I'm reading this from the story. In 1975, while riding a moped in Bermuda, a man was accidentally struck and killed by a taxi. 1 year later, this man's brother was killed in the very same way. In fact, he was riding the very same moped. And to stretch the odds even further, he was struck by the very same taxi driven by the same driver who was carrying the very same passenger that struck and killed his brother. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Now, is this a cursed moped? This is what I think
Or they
that
need to hire a new taxi driver.
I
I
don't know.
mean,
It's a bizarre story, but
it is. But do we really know how many times was there other people hit on mopeds
mhm,
prior to this guy?
right,
Is this taxi driver that careless? That is one that can take you down a rabbit hole, because you could go so many different ways with it. Um, I'm thinking bad luck of the family,
it happened.
it could happen. I mean, karma could have really said, oh, let me have the last laugh.
Well, if you like that story, I'm going to tell you another one that's even crazier. Henry Ziegland thought he had dodged fate. In 1883, he broke off a relationship with his girlfriend, who, out of distress, committed suicide. The girl's brother was so enraged that he hunted down Ziegland and shot him. The brother, believing he had killed Ziegler, then turned the gun on himself and took his own life. But Ziegler had not been killed. The bullet, in fact, had only grazed his face and then lodged in a tree. Ziegler surely thought himself a lucky man. Some years later, however, Ziegler decided to cut down the large tree, which still had the bullet in it. The task seemed so formidable that he decided to blow it up with a few sticks of dynamite, the big tree. The explosion propelled the bullet into Ziegler's head, killing him.
Wow.
You couldn't make up that story. They wouldn't buy it.
It reminds me of that movie, Final Destination. I didn't get you the first time, so I'm going to find some other ways to get you. Wow. Yeah, I'm just thinking the first guy, bad shot. He was supposed to die. But see, again, that's one that you could go into all these theories with it. You know, we all have that. We all have our number, you know, and we're supposed to actually kind of go at that time. So
now somebody obviously will say, well, karma got him for breaking up with his girlfriend, just like because he broke up with the girlfriend. I mean,
yeah,
you know. So
now I believe in karma. I do. I don't, you know, I've never experienced that karma like a death thing. But, you know, I do believe what goes around comes around, you know, and I feel that if you're a certain type of person and you're always doing bad things, that at some point it's going to come back and it's going to, like you looking in a mirror, it all reflects back on you. That is kind of how I believe in karma. This is just straight out, holy crap.
Right. So you're saying you're not sitting there like,
no,
neither am I. But how this comes down to it on an investigation. Here's a suggestion from me. You have to check those things at the door and put them aside. And a lot of times you'll hear stories like this. Like you get a call and say, Henry Ziegler still haunts the land, okay, wherever this took place. And you read this story and you go, I've heard some crazy stories, documented. But they're just crazy stories. I don't proceed, you know, with any of that in mind, because everything is, you know, we're opening the secrets of the cosmos here. And, you know, hey, listen, I'm just a Ghostbuster. Like, I try not to pretend I'm any more than what I am, you know? So it's a great story and it's a weird story, but I'm just going to check that at the door and go do what I'm supposed to do.
Well, and that's what you should be doing. I mean, even if you've seen the story, you're probably sitting there going, holy hell, I better not go over there where the trees are because you never know. Right. But you do have to check that at the door because you can't go into an investigation, especially when you're working with people that are, you know, calling for help and already having that in your mind, because when you have that in your mind, everything you think you hear will start taking you way where you're not supposed to be.
Right. Okay, so that's the end of story time. I'll get rid of that over here.
Those were great, though.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's great. I could do like a show sometime on these. Maybe I do a show called Extremely Strange. Thank you so much for the response. It's 2 days old, and the views on it are. I am so humbled and so grateful. It was not necessarily because I told. It's just a great story about the mansion at Summerwind in Wisconsin. Weird, great story. All right, so let's move on to what I like to call rule number 5. Maintain objectivity when investigating claims of the paranormal. It sounds pretty simple, but if you look at our two friends there, one of them is weighed down by his own agenda. And he doesn't have any time to listen to anything else but that agenda. So here's a couple of things real quick before I get Michelle's thoughts. You can never afford the luxury of belief. You may be a believer, you've seen amazing things, you've experienced amazing things. There's no doubt in your mind that there is someplace else, there is an afterlife, there is a spirit realm. We do go on in some form, and you may believe that and have documentation to bear it out. But every case is different. So whatever your personal experiences are, you can draw on them to do a good job. But you can't project them on a new case because you're starting from scratch. The other thing is, again, we go back to the personal agenda. If it's more about you than it is about them, don't sacrifice the truth for your own personal gain. Don't say it's like, I heard something rumbly and it's got to have a demon. Oh my God, we did this cool demonic case last night, and we're going to put it on YouTube. Then it just becomes performative art, and the truth is lost. And at that point, I have no idea why the hell you decided to do this to begin with.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to piggyback off that. That's one thing I have done is we've gotten called into cases because of that. Instead of listening to what was going on and listening to the people who needed the help, they decided to talk about themselves. Well, we did something like this at this place, you're living, 5 blocks away. You're probably got the same stuff going, not realizing each case has something different. And you have to be, very professional. I harp on that. I really, really harp on that because it's like we went to one case and the lady goes, yeah, they just sat and talked to us about all the cool things that they've done everywhere else and never did nothing except burn some sage before they left and said this should work. So it's like, well, that didn't help, did it?
Right. Right. Well,
it's out there.
We might circle back to this, but now is as good a time as any to say it. When people say they do things scientifically, I think that's a misnomer. I get it. But using technology doesn't necessarily equate to being scientific. And I'm the first to say that the scientific method doesn't play out that well in what we do. Because a lot of what we do is not repeatable. Because you're dealing with people, and people are volatile. We have good moods, good days, bad days. Our emotions are all over the place. So to ask for the same thing to happen at the same time, no matter who does it, scientific method, it kind of breaks down, and it's what people always like to come at us with, the scientific method. Just because you use a microwave doesn't make you a scientific cook. So it's not a case of going about it scientifically. You're using technology. And it's like we're scientific in our approach. Are there any scientists in your group? If there are, fantastic. But we've got to kind of differentiate between those two things a little bit. Doesn't make you any less credible, but I don't know. The other thing I wanted to say about this is going into any location, if you're paying someone to visit, you can't afford to be a believer or a skeptic. You have to be an unbiased observer.
Yes.
Because whatever those two things are, you already have a predetermined outcome or the hope of a predetermined outcome. And you're going to get some level of confirmation bias. And again, it's easier said than done. You got to check all that at the door.
Absolutely. Because you have to go in with an open mind. You have to go in, even though you might not be a counselor or anything like that. We're working with people's emotions. We're
Mhm.
working with people that might have, addicts, different things like that. So you have to go in and read the people before you worry about reading the place.
Right.
And a lot of people forget that piece. They're just like, okay, they told us they are hearing bumps in the night. Well, a lot of investigators want to use big words and say, like you said, scientific type of ways. Well, no, because we cannot register year after year after year and keep running down and saying this is what it is. You have to go in as, I always say go in naked,
Right.
because this way, whatever you're starting to absorb is going to be what you need to deal with.
Right. I think if you're going to say we go about things methodically or systematically,
Yeah.
that's phenomenal that you do that, but science, don't get too wrapped up in the verbiage with that kind of thing, because it's like saying we had a successful investigation. What is your definition of success? Finding evidence? Or is that we did everything, every step, we covered
Yeah.
everything, and we got nothing for data or evidence? I still consider that a successful investigation.
Yeah.
So, again, no agendas, people, and listen, no one's going to come and beat you up or arrest you. You have to look in the mirror and just say, is this about me or is this about them? Because I understand there's a whole new generation of people that are coming to this whose template was podcasts, YouTube, TV. This was their first exposure
Yeah.
to the world of the paranormal. Maybe they had their own experience, but in terms of the world of the paranormal, and sometimes I can't blame them for it because that's how they kind of grew up, TV, radio, podcasts, YouTube, social media. Um, but in the end, really, it's your
Just
intention.
be a decent human being.
What's in here?
Yep.
So
And just be decent.
don't be a paranormal jackass. We covered.
Yes.
All right. So we'll move on. Always assume there is an ordinary explanation until the extraordinary is proven. And of course, there's Mulder and Scully. There must be a rational explanation, even though I'm always wrong. So here come the UFOs and the ghosts, and she calls it swamp gas.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what can I say about that? I'm going to give you a typical quote that's on every website and Facebook page. We come in as skeptics, and that's all I'll say on that. My question is, do you really?
Yeah.
And
Right.
I'll just leave that there for you, Michelle. If anybody out
Well,
there complains, send your letters to Michelle.
oh my gosh.
I'm off the hook.
I just, wow.
Well, we have to
Here's
piss
the
somebody off, so
I'm okay with that because, I've seen some crazy things on Facebook pages, on websites and stuff like that. And, again, we're playing with words, and
mhm,
words are so powerful. And when you have people in those situations, that's what they're drawn to,
right.
and I get so agitated with stuff like that. Um, we're forgetting the human side of all of it.
Right.
Because you think about it, the first thing a lot of these people, I'm going in as a skeptic, is, oh my God, somebody called us and they think they have ghosts. We got to go. Not once have they thought of that person who's opening the door to let you in.
Right.
And that is the biggest pet peeve, because now we have now taken a human and we have just discarded them because we just want to get in their house to see if we can get so-called evidence.
Right.
I'm just going to leave it there.
There are two things. Number one, I understand the statement, we arrive as skeptics. Good for you. However, I would say being a skeptic and being skeptical are two different things. If you're a skeptic, you're a pain in our ass.
Pretty much.
Okay, if you're skeptical, you're not. A skeptic is just, it just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. So if you arrive skeptically, like we mentioned before, don't be a believer or a skeptic, just be unbiased observer. Beautiful. You're off to it. But if you're telling everybody that you arrive at skeptics, what you're doing is repeating what you heard on the Ghost Hunter show back in 2004. You know, and I've told Jason about this already. It's like there are people who still repeat the same stuff that you do, and they've latched onto it when you know that later on in the same paragraph with their mission statement, they say, we want to prove ghosts are real. Well, which is it? Because if you're out to prove ghosts are real, then we're somewhat lacking in that to this point. Just handing over my phone here. Just hang on.
No, you're fine.
News bulletin here. But a lot of people say we arrive as skeptics because that adds a level of credibility, as it should. But you got to live it, is all I'm saying. Then be skeptics. Because if it's just kind of like, we had a case last night, we got some great evidence. Already? You stayed up all night and reviewed it. What you got was a lot of data. You know.
I walked in a skeptic and I came out with all sorts of proof.
Yeah. You know, I mean, and if you did, God bless. God, you know, peer review. I want to see it. But again, you know, you have to have that objectivity when you do this. And don't be afraid to self-defeat yourself. You think you got a great EVP, and then you listen to it and you had a camera going and you find that somebody bumped into a chair and on your recorder it sounds like, get out, you know, when the chair's sliding across the floor. Don't ignore that, you know, just be like, okay, it sucks to have to say we didn't get what I thought, but moving on. You know, you stay in it long. Yeah, you stay in it long enough, you will. But, you know, yeah, and we'll move on because, you know, I mean, you can take things in the wrong direction too. If you're unsure about something, then you can scare the shit out of
absolutely
a family, some kids. You know what I'm saying? Because you already have that bias in your mind. We're here to prove that ghosts exist, damn it. And then you jump at everything to justify the time, the investment you have in it emotionally and financially. Damn it, we're gonna find. I gotta find that ghost, or I'm wasting my time. Don't forget the damage you can do.
Yeah, because I mean, these people will make life decisions out of what you tell them.
That's right.
And that can be very messy. And like you know, you said earlier, if we're going in, yes, we want to debunk everything. We want these people to feel like their home is their home and they're actually safe there. But when we got people going in and doing that kind of stuff, I mean, it alters the whole way of a family. I mean, financially, emotionally, physically, all of it.
Right. Yeah. And again, you can make things wrong if you're just coming at it from one mindset, like tunnel vision,
Yeah.
prove the ghost, prove the ghosts are real. It can affect you, even unintentionally,
Yeah.
subliminally almost, because you have that push and pull, devil and the angel type of thing where, it probably isn't paranormal, but no one really will know. And it can be a struggle sometimes. So this where character comes in. Moving along, number 7. This is one for you. Appearances can be deceiving. There may be more happening than meets the eye. And if you look at our two characters there, the serial killer actually brought her flowers, and the innocent maid is going to chop his head off. So, um, appearances can be deceiving, and this is in your wheelhouse. The only thing I will say is, for instance, all old houses aren't haunted. Just because it looks like out of a movie,
Yeah.
all cemeteries aren't haunted, despite the mist and the looks and things like that. And clients may have their own agendas or their own issues that don't bubble to the surface. And I think you can speak to that much more than I can.
Well, I can actually tell you, when we talked about addiction, mental health, different things like that, play a huge role in this field. And a lot of that becomes self manifestations.
Mm-hmm.
They create their own monsters. And, or we've gone into some places where there was a lot of domestic violence that had created their own monsters, which then it's calling in and stuff, just like your picture showed.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like you said, you have to go in and listen. You can't be doing the talking because you're going to find out the truth in between stuff.
Right.
And and then when you're in a situation like that, everything's demons. And it's kind of like, well, no, it's not demons. It could be demons because that's what they think or see themselves. So again, you got to come with the gloves on and be gentle, but you also got to make them realize these demons they're creating are their own. And it depends on the situation, what they're in. If it's just a bad home life. I went to one, and it was, a mother and daughter not really getting along. Daughters in those years of just pretty much, I want to be left alone, nothing, this whole stuff. But the daughter was also creating her own types of manifestation of shadow people and things because of what she did, but it was, let's blame everything on ghosts,
Right.
and it's like they get blamed for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I don't side with demons, so no one take this wrong, but demons are getting called out for things they're not doing. They're sitting back going, I haven't even started, So, yeah, you definitely got to take everything at face value. And again, you got to go in and just kind of stay right there.
Right.
And just kind of let everything come at you.
You have to ask the right questions. And this is what I mean about being a people person, and you have to ask them in the right way.
Yeah.
Don't go in there pretending you're a clinical psychologist. If you are,
Then
wonderful.
go.
If you have one in your group, wonderful. Someone in the medical profession, absolutely. It's nothing but a plus. But don't pretend to be someone you're not, because the door swings both ways on that. Everything is not what it appears to be, is probably,
Absolutely.
in a nutshell, you know, because everybody has those skeletons in their closet, and the cause and effect of these things may not be surface deep. Family dynamics, as you said, those kind of things can all play into this. And I know we talk about drug use and alcohol use and abuse and medications and how they affect people. But listen, I've heard some weird, wild stories. I've had
Yeah.
women in their mid 60s call me to say that they were carrying Satan's spawn. Okay. And that sounds like, we want to chuckle, but that's a cry for help.
Yes.
And there is absolutely nothing I am trained, educated, or equipped to do in that particular situation. And you have to be humble about it. There is nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. There are not enough people doing this that are just confident enough in themselves to say, I don't have an answer. I don't know. I need to walk away from this.
Yes. That's the thing, I've had to walk away. Um, and I have to be honest, in this situation, I actually had someone that took their life, and I had to deal with that because I
Mm-hmm.
had to kind of walk away because it was something way above. I couldn't do it. And I took it really hard because I'm like, did I do enough? Didn't I do enough? I asked all the right questions. I knew what was going on, but at that point, what are you going to do?
Right.
And you run into this, and that's why it's so important, to go in there knowing you're messing with real people with real emotions. And a lot of times those emotions start really coming out when they start having people come trying to figure out what's going on in their home.
Right.
And it starts pouring out like a waterfall.
Yeah. Well, I have met goth kids that are the most polite,
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful kids. They're trying to find their way. And I've met some button down, evangelical, judgmental
Oh,
sub
yeah.
Indians, right?
Oh,
Who,
yeah.
oh yeah, come to Sunday meeting clothes on, and they are the most judgmental, vile, discriminatory people in the world. And there are
Oh,
some
yeah.
great ones too. Everything's a little bit different. You got to have that conversation before you can find anything. All right, so let's move on to number 8. If you publicize your cases, bear in mind what is written and said can bear tremendous influence. For example, boy, the Conjuring House sticks out in my mind. This was made for that. Be
Yeah.
careful. Be careful not to perpetuate a myth or a legend or a false story. Be mindful of that. Don't try to go in and become part of that story. Oh my God, I was pushed up against the wall. No, you weren't. Also, be careful not to begin one. Because if
Correct.
you're going to say that the old farmer who lived here was a Satan worshiper and you have absolutely no documentation or facts to bear that out, you're besmirching another human being. May he rest in peace. And that's not fair to do that. So, find out what's going on, get some facts. That's what investigation, paranormal investigation, that's what an investigator does. They research, they dig, they get facts. So, and if you
Absolutely.
have an opinion, your opinion should reflect facts.
That simply said, I mean, honestly, there's really not much to fall back on that one.
Yeah.
I've never been to The Conjuring, so, but I've heard so many
Two
different
weeks.
stories.
2 weeks.
I know. But again, you hear all these stories, from demons to no demons to, all this other stuff. And it's really, it starts creating its own type of, again, history is written by man. And then you got some of the real history that has been forgotten to put in the books.
Right.
And that you can still have it. It's out there. And like you said, being an investigator, you can find some of those in-between truths to kind of make that story where it really needs to go.
Right. We live in an information age now. So, I mean, not everything's out there, but, you can find it if you look for it.
It's out there. You probably would have to go to the library and actually use, the Rolodex cards thingies to find it.
Right.
Microfiche.
Right. I mean, and don't rush to judgment before all the facts are in either.
Absolutely.
Take your time on that. Don't make up stories, and there are enough of them out there. Shelley says, "Oh man, you're really going to connect, Michelle. Woo!
Yeah, I can't wait.
With the house."
With the house.
The Hizu. Sarah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, that's really awesome right there.
We love Shelley around these parts. We do. Conjuring House is like a lady that had been given a bad reputation that has perpetuated without a true source. It's not like in the words of Lady Gaga, bad reputation, right?
Yeah.
But that's what we're talking about in essence, because Conjuring House may be the first thing that pops into my mind. My God, it's not the only one. It's not even close to the only one. As a matter of fact, in the next rule, I will get into a couple of those. Quick question to you from George Lopez. Question: can dark energy in the living also affect the spirits?
Absolutely, 100%. It really can. We don't realize that the energy base that we all put off to will also affect what happens with the energy that's in a home, as with spirits. And, it can actually go off on them. It can manifest into something more. And I think spirit can also alter because of that.
Right.
Again, if you got that bully, on both sides, it works that way. And 100%.
There you have it.
My truth. Boom.
And Michelle knows because she's wicked smart. Okay. I am going to show you a picture that's going to lead into the next rule. Here's the picture. That's a lovely house, isn't it?
Oh, so beautiful.
That's a beautiful home. In its previous state, that's what it was, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll come back to that in a minute because there's a little story about that. But media coverage can be sensational and inaccurate and can influence the investigator. Okay, so this we don't have to belabor it. It kind of harkens back to what we were just talking about: inaccurate information, sensationalism. I will just tell you that, yes, this is the Amityville house the way it looks now. You will notice those two iconic upper third floor windows have gone from the half moon to this. And there's a little story behind that. It's because one of the owners took them out because they got sick of people riding around the neighborhood looking for that identifying characteristic. And by taking them out and putting in the regular rectangle windows, he thought that would discourage people from bothering them. The story goes a lot of people have lived there and moved out. So immediately everybody goes to the Amityville house. It's basically because their privacy kept being invaded. People walking on their lawn, staring into their windows, literally knocking on their door, wanting to take a tour. And that's why nobody lived there for very long after, the DeFeo incident, the Lutz incident, because the sensationalism just kind of drives those things. Now, I don't know. I don't really want to get into it tonight as far as the veracity of the story. I think it's a horrible murder story. I'm really on the fence about the paranormal. I really am, because the scales tip between exploitation and what's real. So at one point, I know it made a great story, but for me personally, knowing more about it, learning more about the dynamics there, the jury's still out on that one. Do you have any strong thoughts on that at all, Michelle? Or
not as much on the Lutz family. I'm not sure how I feel about that particular, but the DeFeo, I think there was drugs and mental health issues. I strongly believe that he did hear the voices and it did drive him. I know there was a lot of interviews where he was talking to the priest and they were talking, demonic type of stuff. Again, this is where I'm saying, there's that fine line. And because of that fine line, it was able to take off and have its own, its own entity. Do I think there was things? I think the family, probably had a lot of family issues. So, I think it was a snap, and I think all of it, it was personal demons more than a demon.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel strongly about. It would have been great if they would have evaluated him a little more just to kind of see, but about the Lutzes, I can't really say because I'm very on the fence. I don't know if it was for money or whatever, or did something happen. I know everything embellishes stuff, especially when it comes to movies and stuff like that. But again, like you said, this is stuff that's fed to us, and that's the only pictures we can think of. It's not like we can't see past that it was a movie or a so-called documentary that was embellished a little bit.
There is going to come a time that I'm probably going to really piss some people off by doing a story on the Winchester house.
Oh boy.
And how exactly where I think the origin of all of this came from. And it may disappoint some people because I don't think it had anything to do with seances and spirits of people who died by the Winchester rifles. It involves the number 13 and Sir Francis Bacon. That's all I'll say about that right now, because I really don't feel like going into it. Not tonight. But let's take the Myrtles Plantation as another example.
Yeah, been there.
It's been everywhere. Chloe, the servant woman. Okay, they have the owner at the time as a philandering. The guy was a very pious, never cheated on his wife. The 2 daughters died natural causes, as did his wife. They weren't poisoned by oleander, I think, that was in cake. And Chloe, at that time, census were being taken, including slaves, particularly slaves who lived in the home. Her name never shows up. There is reason to believe that she never existed. Certainly can't document her. But the story is the story. And
now, and the story is she got caught that it was the other slaves that killed her.
Right.
So,
But the deal is, Michelle, these places like Myrtle's, no one's saying it's not haunted. Conjuring
I will
House.
tell you, it is haunted. Was
Yes.
there? It's. I will say it's very active, but it wasn't in any of the house or buildings. It was when we were on the outside on the land. That's where stuff was happening.
Yeah. Sarah Yusuf, what did the wife and kids die of then? Natural causes. Or some possibly illness back then, but they weren't
Yeah.
poisoned. Um, Conjuring House, same thing. Without all the rest of the Bathsheba witch thing, the place is amazingly active. Myrtle's Plantation, but yet those are the stories they choose to, those are the stories they choose to promote and to make a thing out of. So don't be influenced by these things. Just be like, I've seen people, I've had groups come in a Conjuring House where a couple of women are arm in arm and they're like, I don't know, I don't like it in here. They watch the movie or something. And, it's just kind of like, okay, don't worry about it. We're going to talk you off the ledge tonight. You'll see. You'll see. You're going to end up feeling so welcome and so comfortable in here. But you got to give it a chance. And as an investigator, just because you go into some asylum that's been on 19 TV shows,
Yeah.
take a deep breath, treat it as a space. Don't let that, I know, easier said than done, but don't let it get into your head that something awful
Well,
is
and
going to
that's what draws people to go to those places because of what
happen.
they've read and seen,
Right.
So
Yeah. Okay, moving past that, let's get into the human mind when faced with the unknown will often assign supernatural values to the experience because we think we're so smart that we know
yeah.
everything. And the first time we see something that we've never seen before, we go, oh my God, it's the supernatural at work. You know, we're still living in caves when it comes to that stuff. We don't, we see something, it could be a cloud we've never seen before, and we immediately think we're under attack, we're under invasion. It's just, it's just part of the way we're wired.
Yeah, and the mind is such a powerful thing,
Yeah.
So you kind of got to remember when you're dealing with this, you are trying to be on that different realm because you're trying to meet it there. I mean, just like my story, being younger, what I was seeing, like, what the heck is going on here? I can't figure this out.
Right.
And, even though I was seeing it a certain way, my mind was trying to fix it to say, this is something.
Right.
So, it really gets out there and your mind will make it, look at the clouds. I mean, perfect. You can make any shape in the clouds and it always looks like something. Like all the stuff you see on Facebook, seeing Jesus in the cloud and all that kind of stuff.
Boy, I'm glad you went there because check this out.
Yep.
Okay. What's everybody looking at out there?
Oh, yeah.
Breakfast skeleton and I don't know, a clown tree. It's
Yeah.
a good time. It's a good time at this point. Well, I think the thing is, as long as you're aware of the fact that you're not infallible when it comes to this, then you're well on your way to handle it. But if you're in
Yeah.
denial, I can't be fooled. It's like, as long as human beings are doing this, you're going to be fooled once in a while. But I want to talk a little bit about pareidolia and matrixing. And I want to bring
Yeah.
these up because I love the egg guy. That's the Eggman, Goo Goo Gajoob. Okay, pareidolia matrixing. Orbs, clouds. Intellectually, it's a cloud, but it looks like a duck. I'm going to, in my simple way, try to break this down like a 5-year-old would be explaining it to you, right? pareidolia, matrixing, is something in our genetic code, our DNA, left over from the Neanderthal period, where human beings could have the ability to make out shapes out of chaos. And it was a defense mechanism because something lurking in the bushes could be a threat, could be an animal, could be another
Yeah.
Neanderthal. So we developed the ability from our memory banks to make sense out of chaos. That looks like a face. That looks like this. It's a human trait.
Yeah.
And as I said, a defense mechanism. This is why the Rorschach test exists. They give you these two ink blots, and they say,
Yeah.
"Tell me." I even got the beard for it for a psychologist. You know, tell me
Yeah.
how you feel right now. What do you see?
What do you
And
see?
amazingly, if you administer Rorschach tests, adults tend to see faces, children tend to see animals.
Yep. Because everything we look at, we're trying to put a recognition to it because our brain has constantly done that. And I mean, just like when you show a picture with some of the sunlight and you have a tree in the background and it reflects, you can send that to 10 people and 10 people will have different ways of how they actually seen that. You know, and all of them will see a face, but the face is different. The nose is in a different place and everything else. So the egg guy looks like, yeah.
Fight or flight. How that pertains to you as an investigator, I would be really hesitant to put that forth as evidence, particularly if I was giving it to somebody to try to prove that they have a ghost in their house. Especially, you know, if I've taken a picture near a reflective surface like a mirror or a window or a light, those can be like really tricky. And I'm not saying orbs as plasma or energy don't exist. I've seen one of the most amazing things since I've been doing this based on a light, an orb, you know. But understand that orbs only became a thing in the early 1980s when they developed the digital camera, where the flash was right next to the lens. And then suddenly these things like orbs showed up. It's a miracle. Okay. The UFO community grabbed them first and said, these are space vehicles. But eventually somebody there went, no, I don't think so. So the ghost people said, well, we'll just take that over to our side. Thank you very much. And we have not let it go.
I think that is the biggest fight that you'll see on social media, orb or not orb. And yeah, you know, or the memes that show the pledge, you know, how to fight orbs, you know, things like that. So,
yeah. So, I mean, you know, I get pictures all the time. I don't know if you do. Somebody, you know, tell me what's in it. So I will say, you know, I've given up doing it because I don't need the arguments. And the argument is usually, well, that looks like a spider, or it could be a spider. No, that's impossible. It can't be a spider because there's no spiders in the house. It's like, so inevitably it comes around to, well, how do you explain? I don't have to explain anything. You sent me the picture. I can't prove
got
a
one of
negative.
those. Yeah.
If the burden suddenly shifts to me to say, you know, I don't have to explain it. You have to explain it. You know?
Oh yeah, I love it when you're like, you know, could it be a reflection? Could it be? Oh no. It's midnight and you're telling me you didn't take a flash? You know, no, we didn't take flashes. Oh, okay. And then you just kind of leave it because you're just like, this, just no. No,
I mean, we're not making fun of everybody, you know, we're trying to,
no,
and
no.
I have never said I'm the final word in anything. I've just seen a lot of these things. I've taken a lot of them. You know, test it, you know, and it's like, but yeah, but that's not the way dust moves. Are you a dustologist or something? There's airflow, convection. Go on the highest shelf at a random room in your house and run your finger along it. What are you going to see? And how did it get there?
Yep. And
Dust
see,
doesn't
with
move.
me, it's a little different because I can see things. So, I kind of, that's why I have a hard time with certain, like pictures and all that, because I'm looking going, that's not what I'm seeing. So now I get beat up twice because they're like, well, you're just seeing things wrong.
Oh,
Okay, can
okay.
you see what I'm seeing? Yeah, you go ahead and do your thing. And again, nobody's wrong in this. Everybody has their own way.
Right.
But again, when we're talking in the sense of helping families in need with this kind of stuff, that's the point where you're going to have to, be that professional, if you want to call yourself that, to make sure you're not using some of those things to, give back to those people. So there's a time and place.
Amen for that. Now, this next, we only got a couple of more of these left before we call it a night. But this one I don't know, Michelle, you and I get along pretty good up to
Yeah.
now. Maybe. Up to now.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Here we go. When investigating paranormal claims, conclusions cannot be formed on intuition alone. And I submit this wonderful little chart here. All right, intuition takes a problem, chews it up, generates ideas. But gut feelings have to be checked systematically. Number two, over there on the right, those ideas are tested. Data kills most of them. And then the best one remaining moves forward as your solution. So you research and test before your conclusion, and then hopefully you have tangible evidence. So, in a nutshell, it's the old Arthur Conan Doyle: when you eliminate all possibilities, whatever's left, no matter how remarkable, has to be the truth. You know, Sherlock Holmes, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. For those of us who are as psychic or intuitive as this computer mouse that I'm holding here, we have to rely on that kind of thing. Documentation, data, and it can really get tedious sometimes, but I would submit to you, even though on occasion we have used mediums, there has to be, you have to add on some kind of data to pass that along. Now, the confirmation could come from the clients. It's like, oh my God, yes, that's her name. Oh my God, yes, that did happen there. And that's good enough for me. That's witness testimony. I never discard it. But we need a little bit of data. So, intuition, that sense, kind of explain it to us muggles out here who aren't, I don't know if it's blessed or a curse, probably both. I'll leave that to you. But how do you feel about that? Like, you see things, but it's like, do you absolutely encourage and welcome? Go check me out. Go check me out. Check this out. Get the data to back it up if you can. We'll put it all together in a nice package and we'll give it to these people as we work toward a resolution.
Well, you're going to like me a little bit still. So I
Oh,
am
cool.
100% with that. The validation, whether it's catching it on camera or, the witness stuff, it has to be done. Here's the biggest thing people think with psychic mediums, trance mediums, anything, that when we go into a room, we're reading this room and there's no other way.
Right.
That is so not right, because here's the thing. When you're shining that light of yourself and you're bringing in and trying to help, you could be bringing a ghost from another state and it ends up there. So you have to make sure you're getting that data, like you said, to eliminate some of the stuff that would be outside of it, to make sure we're giving the correct information for the people who are helping.
Right.
I am the first one to say, I need you to check on this. I never know the history of any place I go. I don't go by what I hear in the movies. I go and I let the place and the people speak to me. Well, I don't even let that happen. I let the dead speak to me.
Right.
And there's been many times, because the dead tell the truth, that I will tell, like, "Oh, well, he wasn't a nice guy, and this is how she really died. But back in those days, who knew?"
Right.
And people are like, that can't happen because it wasn't in the book. Well, now we're going to start getting that. I need that data behind me to say, this is really real, you know. So I definitely always, please check me out. I think I'm getting wonky stuff. I feel like I'm getting something that doesn't belong here. I need you guys to help me out on this. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Sarah makes a good point. The dead can lie as well. Sure,
They can.
that's part of your character. So this is why, documentation. It's a slippery slope, because if they lie to you, I mean, I'm not going to bust into the room ever and say, "Aha, I've caught you in a lie." It'll be kind of like, "Oh, this is what we got, Michelle." It's like, yeah, that guy didn't exist. So we put the pieces together, and maybe we have another visit with that
Correct.
person. It's like, hey, buddy, look, it's like, this is all bullshit,
Yeah,
but
because when you have spirits that were very negative in life,
yeah,
maybe, they were thieves, liars, whatever, they can mimic to be whatever, Yeah, I can mimic to be a little girl, or I can mimic to be, the best person ever. Again, like the way I see them, again, I don't give love notes. So I'm never going to say grandma, grandpa are here. It's going to be, yeah, he was the mayor of the town. Everybody loved him because he was so great. But behind closed doors, he was beating his wife every night and, things like that.
right.
That's the stuff that starts showing itself. Well, I need people to back me up to do it. And that's where the team comes in. And I'll be like, okay, let's start testing and asking certain questions and see how it responds to them.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
you have to.
The stone cold truth is, not every story has a happy ending.
No. And not every ghost is friendly.
No. I mean, I'm convinced that we carry over personality traits. I've bore witness to it. It's like a neighborhood over there. There are people on the other side saying, "Goddamn kids running around here." Swear to God,
Yeah.
It's just in another place.
It's
All
our energy imprint.
Yes. Okay. Last two, moving on to 12. There is always the possibility that the subculture, learn how to spell, create self-perceived perceptions. I was going to blame auto spell on that, but I can't because I did it on my computer. Okay. And the picture I want to show, this doesn't make the story any better, but here you go. And what this means, essentially, we talked about it before, Michelle, self-diagnosis.
Yeah.
Where disturbing behavior is sometimes rationalized because of a situation. For example, well, it was never like this until we moved into this house. And behavior determines attitude rather than the other way around.
Correct.
In plain English, in some situations, it is easier to blame the ghost or the demon rather than take accountability for your situation.
100%. We as humans are the worst to be able to look in the mirror and pretty much say what we see is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We automatically try to put it somewhere else because we feel like then this way we don't have to deal with it. And it also happens with getting the calls to some of these families where there is no spirits haunting them. It is because it's very toxic.
Mm-hmm. And people are influenced by a lot of things. We have seen
Absolutely.
that when someone calls me up and says, you know, hi, I'm looking for an investigation. It's like, first of all, tell me your name, where you live, tell me your story. Investigations are very intrusive things. You
Hmm.
know, your whole behavior will have to change for a number of hours. No, you can't watch TV, you know, so let's mutually decide. If I can't help you on the phone, maybe by having a conversation, then maybe we'll give a visit. But people self-diagnose themselves. If there's more than 5 flies in the house, it's an infestation.
Yeah.
They're influenced a lot in popular culture. And this is where the self-diagnosis comes from, which is why you need a very calm, rational, mature person to go in and assess the situation. And it can get a little sticky. I mean, I've gone into places where people were essentially living in squalor, something they gave up on something. And, you know, I would always recommend, you know, get some flowers, clean up, open the shades, change your light bulbs, bring some light into your situation, into your habitat. You know, just lighten things up, brighten things up a little bit. Because, I mean, we could get into a long conversation about poltergeist, tulpas. We could go on and on with the, you know,
Yeah.
the power of
But
intention. Yeah,
yeah, well, and you think about it, if somebody is living with a lot of clutter or a house that's super messy, and I'm talking like the extreme. I'm not just talking things laying around here and there.
right. No.
It actually will give that person the feeling of oppression. I feel like I have a demon on me all the time. Constantly feel heavy. It makes me, really depressed. I just want to stay in dark places. You have made your space the same way,
Mhm.
and so you start getting those feelings, just like you said, 5 flies, infestation. When you're living in a certain way in your home, it can also give you those feelings of oppression and different things. And then as you're starting to feel it, your psyche starts taking over. And now you're starting to see a lot of things. There's demons in your house. They're coming to get you. They're going to, if you don't hurry up and come, I'm going to die because they want me to kill myself because that's all I keep hearing. So
Mhm.
it becomes this domino effect on all of it. And that is because of, seeing things out there and then feel like, okay, I have 2 of the 5, so this is where I'm at.
Yeah. And I think we run into that more and more often in contemporary times because, I mean, things like television are a powerful medium. That's why they're selling Cadillacs on there, you
Yeah.
know, and soap and, you know, and everything else. It's influential. I think it gives an unrealistic look at what we actually do because it's not anywhere near as dramatic. Um, Again, we go back to being methodical and systematic, and there's nothing exciting about being methodical.
No.
There, there just really isn't. But it's the reality of people who take the time to try to do the best that they can. But I've run into that on many occasions. You know, my husband lost his job and somebody got sick, and nothing happened until we moved into this house. And I'm not discounting that. Don't get me wrong. Fine, we'll look into the property, because I don't believe that somebody have had to die a horrible and tragic death there for it to be active. Not necessarily. That's kind of a trope, kind of cliche a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
But I think what we're saying is you look at all angles, and sometimes those angles include your own accountability on things like that.
100%.
Yeah.
And again, we can't do it. A lot of people have a hard time doing it, and that is self-healing. If you look at yourself and you don't like something. So when I work with a lot of people, especially when they're getting in that, I make them look in a mirror. I make them talk to themselves, almost to the sense of like they're reading their own obituary to do a rebirth. And sometimes that is like the best thing for them to do, because then part of doing the paranormal investigation and doing all that, you're kind of combining the two. So the intentions become more of a positive outlook instead of, oh my God, you didn't catch anything and now I'm going to die.
Right.
It tiptoes, one step at a time. But when you make those people do that and look in the mirror and read their obituaries and get rid of that old and bring that new, it actually helps with a big part of the investigation too.
Well, one of the things we always recommend is an affirmation. Stand up, take back your space. Don't allow yourself to become a victim. Don't allow it. Don't be a victim.
And it's easier. That's right. And it's easier to be a victim than actually being powerful, because everybody plays the victim.
Right. So it's just something, again, it's a tool in the toolbox. And, if you do this long enough, listen, you're going to see a lot of things. And like I say, not all of them have happy endings, but, if you're afraid to get hit by the pitch, don't get in the batter's box.
Yeah.
And finally, we must be extremely careful not to project our personal beliefs, suspicions, or experiences into the minds of those claiming or wanting to have experienced a paranormal event. Judge things as they are, not as we are. So basically, again, your personal beliefs have no bearing on investigating the paranormal. What you want to believe, experiences can definitely help, but you can't project yourself into the equation, because you lose your objectivity that way. Because every location's like a fingerprint. There may be similarities, but they're different in some way.
Yeah. And don't let the history of those things, or, like when you get tours or different things, don't let that mess with your judgment of what you could actually be there. Because again, a lot of it has been written. Doesn't mean it's always the full story.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've come to our 90-minute there. It was a really good talk. I agree with you, Sarah. One piece of housework before we get out of here tonight. I want to talk to you a little bit about Sunday's Dead Air show. It is our annual Ocean State Paracon preview. So we'll be on from 8 to 10. We're going to be off the following week, Labor Day weekend, holiday, yay. So we're going to bump it up a little bit, and we are going to have a lot of our guests dropping by that night, talk a little bit about the event and their experiences there. I want to put up the poster for everyone to see. Now, Andrea and Cody and Satori are in Michigan right now, but they're going to give it the old college try. Jen and Corey will likely be by, Jacqueline, Chris Rondina, Ron Murphy, and, of course, Michelle Roos. So now's as good a time as any to tell you we're doing this all again Sunday night if you're available. So guests will be dropping in and out, whether it's for 2 hours, 1 hour, 10 minutes, whatever the case may be. And we're going to talk a little bit about the event, tell you a little bit about it and what we're doing. But again, we're just going to have a little bit of fun, which is what we try to do on this show. It is not designed to be an interview show. We just try to come up with a topic we think you're interested in, bring some really smart people, some really people who have had experience in the field to talk about these things. And we've had one of those tonight, and Michelle Roos. And Michelle, I can't thank you enough for taking some time out of your night to drop by and spend a little bit of time with us.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. I've been seeing some of the comments popping up. You have some amazing people that support you and watch this. So hopefully I'll meet some of them at some point. But thank you. Really had a great time.
We are going to be seeing a lot of people there. Quick question, Shelley, will this be aired? Shelley, do you mean the Sunday show, our regular show? Or
I
the
think
Paragon?
so.
It's not a weird, it may have been a weird question. The Sunday show, of course, will be simulcast here and on KGRA. I will tell you that there are a lot of YouTube and TikTok influencers that are going to be at Paragon this year. And there are an awful lot of people that are going to be live streaming things during the day. And so we'll try to give you a heads up on who they're going to be so you can kind of be with us a little bit and see some of the people and some of the goings on there. So much going on. We added a Conjuring House investigation Saturday night. That sold out in like 5 days, as did the one on Sunday. We're going to be showing the movie in the theater Saturday night, and it's an indoor-outdoor event. It's like a paranormal farmer's market, is the way I put it. So we are so looking forward to seeing you there, Michelle, your first trip to Rhode Island.
Yes.
I think it's going to be a memorable one.
I bring it on. I'm ready.
I know. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I thank you so much for tuning in to Just Another Paranormal Podcast. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Until then, the wheels will be turning. And if you have any suggestions for what you'd like for us to hit on, sometimes we'll go for an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, depending if we get into it. Hey, listen, we're all ears. The show belongs to all of us, and we want to keep you coming back. So with that, on behalf of Michelle Roos, I'm Ken DaCosta. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And again, Dead Air, Full Spectrum, this Sunday. So we'll see you then.